Hi, Mark from Sharkbait here. It is August 2012 and it's time to do a redo of our old AVET video, which I guess is probably our first one or one of our first ones to put up going over product. AVET has been around for about, close to 10 years now. We were one of their first dealers, probably closest to them at the beginning. And we've been fortunate to have been very close with AVET and to be their largest retailer as we have been from their beginning. We stock more AVET reels and more colors and more configurations than anyone else does and anyone else can. And at this point in time, my goodness, they have expanded their line to a point where there are almost too many options for a person. And so we have to depend not only on our inventory but also on theirs when people get into some of the custom stuff and different color, lefties and righties and with magnetic cast control and without. Bottom line, they make a plethora of reels because people have a lot of different needs for reels. And in 2012, they introduced a long anticipated 3-speed model to complement their 2 speeds and single speeds, all lever drags. So the point of this video is just going to be a real brief, as much as I can, overview of the AVET line. Basically about this company. They are located here in Southern California. They're in the San Fernando Valley. This is an American manufactured product. It's not coming from overseas. The brothers that own the firm, 2 brothers, one lefty, one righty, but the 2 brothers that own the firm are top-notch machinists and designers who also love to fish. So they're living a dream. Their basic business has been in the medical supply field, and they've done some other stuff with their machining. They have in their plant, and I think they still have the same number, roughly 35 CNC machines. As long as one of these CNC machines are working, they're making money. When they're idle, they don't. And these fellas work hard. The staff they have works hard, and they're producing all the time. And they've reached economies of scale that other manufacturers can't. They're also a privately held firm, which means they're not trying to satisfy shareholders or anyone else. They're trying to satisfy their wives and families and build a business. And they have certainly done that, because when you go on the long-range boats at this point in time, the reels you see in a dominant position are the AVET reels, and those are the ones those become the go-to reels for lots of guys on the boats. So now they're the big kid on the block that everybody's trying to knock off, and imitation maybe is a great form of flattery, because what they've done in terms of making lever drag reels that have excellent free spool and casting performance has been attempted to be duplicated by all the other manufacturers, some to a fair extent and some to a much lesser extent in terms of what they've come up with. AVET certainly has been doing it longer, and they have a better mousetrap. So enough yakking for me. I'll get the camera focused up a little more closely. We'll pull out some models and we'll go over the range of offerings which these guys have. Be just a moment. Okay, starting from the smallest reel within the AVET lineup is the little SX, and the SX is a diminutive piece, very, very small. Like all AVET reels, it utilizes a lever drag, which is what this lever here does. That is your strike position, that's your full. Unique to the AVET reels, you've got a couple of different detents, 3 to be exact. The first one is a bait feeder position and was their first attempt at making a cast control reel. Since these reels free spool so beautifully, and I probably should have put a little dot on this guy to show you just how well she spins. They are amazing pieces in terms of what they can do in terms of casting performance. Because of that free spool, folks that are new to a saltwater reel have difficulty typically in controlling the spool. And so this was their first attempt at applying a little bit of brake pressure, mechanical pressure, as a cast control. And this first notch up does that. It'll add a little bit of resistance to the spool based upon our preset condition. Now, the purpose of this video is to show models, not to show you how to set the drag on a reel. We have another video posted about setting the drag on a lever drag reel, and this should be mandatory viewing for anyone who's going to own an AVET reel or any lever drag, because you must, to get the most out of the reel, to get the greatest benefit out of a lever drag reel, you want to know how to set the drag. and there is a right way and a wrong way to do it, and you should know it as a user of these products. So in any event, first position up is a mechanical control. It can also be used for feeding a bait, so you've got a little restriction on the spool to prevent it from having an overrun. Again, a little bit of thumb pressure goes a long way, and you'll note the way they cut the frame, you've got an area for your thumb to go, which is kind of nice. SX, really small. Now the SX is also available in a 2-speed form, and the 2 speeds from AVET are very nicely designed pieces. Basically, to drop the gear ratio to a lower rate, you push the button. To release that and to go back up to your higher gear ratio, basically is with your thumb. So you can shift on the fly, not moving your hand from the knob, staying in control of the fish. A 2-speed reel basically it's just a brilliant piece of design to have on a piece when you're fishing, for better quality fish. You've got speed where speed's important as far as getting bit, getting noticed. Some fish really get turned on by speed, and you have more cranking power when you drop that gear ratio down. In the case of the SX, it's a 6-4, so 6-to-1 on the high end, 4-to-1 on the lower end, and so you've got a good deal of power and control with the piece. And again, they cast beautifully on the right rod. This little SX is a brilliant piece to have. Now they'll take an SX one step up and get into a Raptor series, and we'll go over the Raptors a little bit later on what differentiates them from a standard reel in the AVET lineup. The SX and the step up MX series, and this is the MXJ, so it's as narrow as the SX, but it's a little bit taller. The MX and the SX share the same drag. Again, it's a carbon fiber drag. It's a good size drag. The carbon fiber never wears. From my experience, we've yet to need to replace a drag on an AVET reel. That is, unless somebody has foolishly ladled on grease on the drag, at which point it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. The MXJ, or the MX series, is available in 2 different widths. The J is the skinny, the MXL is the wider version. And again, these pieces are available with single speed or in a 2-speed mode. The black one here has the 2-speed. And again, that adds to the versatility of a piece. It's a nice step up, but if you're going to be trying to keep the price point low, you go single speed. If you can swing it to go to the 2-speed, I've got to say the versatility factor is excellent when you do that, because you'll find that you don't need maybe as many reels with you on the boat. You'll get one reel to perform a couple of different jobs. Wasn't too long ago, you'd take a long range trip and you'd have 13 rods and reels with you. So you have something for wahoo, something for tuna, something for yellowtail, long rods, short rods, fast gear ratios, low gear ratios. These days, I find myself bringing a lot less gear with me on the boats because that gear can perform more functions. I can catch a tuna on the same reel I can catch a wahoo with. I just don't typically downshift on a wahoo. Okay. SX, MX series, these guys will perform up to 10 pounds worth of drag. They'll button down at about 14. Commonly you're not fishing on that outside limit. You're fishing more like 7 pounds, maybe up to 8 pounds or less. That roughly is equivalent to fishing 20 to 30 pound line. 20 on a little SX. If you put 300 yards of 30-pound braid on, you've got room for about 100, 120 yards of 20-pound mono on top. If you go to an MXJ, you can go ahead and go to, say, 50-pound braid and then fish that piece up to 30 pounds in the case of both the MXL and the MXJ. This piece will hold, 300 yards of 20-pound straight mono. If you go to the MXL versus the MXJ, you'll pick up another 60 yards, so call it 360 of 20-pound straight mono. On an SX, it'll do 300 yards or better of 15, and we'll wind up doing, about 220 yards of 20-pound mono. So the braid really comes in handy as far as increasing the versatility of these pieces. I mentioned a magnetic cast control system, maybe in '98, pretty close to it. They followed up on the mechanical braking, which is just that first detent on your lever which makes use of your drag system to add a little resistance to the spool. When they moved to the magnetic cast control pieces, or Magic Cast, MC is the designation, they utilize a magnet, and you'll notice they'll have a control, a 1 through 5 scale knob on the side plate of the reel. This isn't doing any magnet to metal contact. It's simply using the flux field of the magnet and changing its shape. And by doing so, once this reel is out of control, as far as its free spool, it'll add some correction to that and slow the spool down. It does not restrict the spool, and that's one thing that some folks have tried to say, oh, it cuts down your casting distance. Bunk, absolute bunk. I own reels from AVET with and without that feature. It does not detract from casting if you set it up properly, and by that I mean when I'm tossing heavier lures and jigs, I'll crank this puppy up to 5, and I can literally take my thumb off the spool without an overrun more often than not. Or if I'm tossing bait, I'll crank her down to 1 and I'll use my thumb more. It will not restrict the spool, but it will correct for that overrun. It's a good feature to have. I think especially important as we take the size of the reels down. So we have 2 versions of the AVET reels, those with the cast control and those without. Thus, MC would be the feature. Now they go one step further. They also offer the Raptor Series. Now the Raptor Series reels, you'll note, have a ramp on the lever. This happens, the Raptors basically have all the bells and whistles. This is, 2-speed, lever drag of course. You have a ramp so it's more precise as far as where you're setting the drag. You'll push a button to go to full, so you're not going to do that accidentally. And you make use of the magnetic cast control. On the standard series reels, MX and SX series, again, we can do up to 10 pounds of drag. When you go, now we're effectively greater than doubling that in terms of its drag range. What's the benefit there? Less side load pressure. Difference is also, you'll notice, a little bit wider because it has another drag element within the reel on the side plate. Typically they'll cut the spool a little bit differently as well. You'll gain a little line capacity. I've got one of these as a Raptor on an MXL. I'll fish 40 and 50 on. 40 is a nice place for it in my opinion anyway. Where on a standard SX or MX, that's a 20 to 30 pound reel. 30's on the outside edge as far as what they'll do in terms of drag. You can put any type of line on a reel you want to. That doesn't make it, I could put 100-pound line on this piece. That doesn't make it a 100-pound reel. What makes it a 100-pound reel is having the drag to justify that line test and to fish it effectively. Okay, so 2 different versions of AVETs. And we have the option in terms of gear ratios. Now let's look at just relative sizes here. In terms of sizes on the AVET reels, we go from a little SX to an MX. This happens to be an MXJ, MXL. This happens to be a Raptor. They get wider, okay? Same diameter on these 2 pieces as far as the height of the side plate, smaller on the SX. When we move from that series, we get into a JX and the LX. The JXs and LXs are brilliant pieces. The differentiating point here, again, will be the amount of drag they can pull, as well line capacity. Move them back here and you might be able to see them a little bit better. A JX is like a Mule 332 in the hands. It's relatively tall and fairly skinny. Makes it easier to level line. If you do a ton of casting, a narrow reel is a nice thing to have. The standard model JXs and LXs, which are both the same reel but for the width of the frame, these guys will turn 15 pounds of drag and will button down, getting close to 20. Okay, makes them very nice, suitable pieces for fishing up to 50-pound line. 40 is a sweet spot. Some guys will go 30 here and play the drags conservatively. I tend to fish mine at 40. When I go to 50, if I'm setting that drag fairly high, you will get some binding. In other words, you'll feel that resistance. However, when you shift over to a Raptor version of that piece, forget it. You don't have any binding when you go Raptor. A little different animal that way. Oh boy, I didn't show off the blue one. It's kind of a pretty model too. The reds, I have to say, are an exclusive for us. Given our volume with AVET, we asked them to make this up and gave them a color swatch a number of years ago, and they've been kind enough to do that. The only catch is we have to do these in high quantity, and it costs a little more to get the reds done. But they're a beautiful, beautiful piece. Now, like the other models from AVET, these are available with or without the magnetic cast control. You can see that features on the JX. It's not on the LX model we have pictured. When you go to the Raptor version, certainly you'll have all the bells and whistles. Again, it comes with the magnetic cast control, and you pick up the ramp as far as the more precise strike setting. A little bit wider on that crank side. Let's see if I can pull this in. A little bit wider on the crank side plate, because you're making, you've got to have space for that extra drag element in there. When we move up from our JX and LX, we go to the HX series. And the HX will do a good 20 pounds of drag with free spool and button down in the upper 20s, like 28, getting close to 30. They try and back off that a little bit from the factory. You also pick up lugs, which you can reverse and use as plugs instead. So when you go to the HX, you've got more drag to work with, very appropriate for 50 and 60 pound line. Some guys will go as much as 80 on these guys. Again, note that you've got 20 pounds of usable drag to work with. You can take this a notch further by going to the Raptor model, and this happens to be a Raptor. And with the Raptor, my gosh, you're turning drag that's got to be darn close to 40 pounds, almost double what you get from a standard model. Whether or not that's useful to you, that's your call. I know on the HX series, they're available in 3 different widths. This is the standard HX, commonly referred to as a HUX. They also make a narrower version that's a little bit wider than a thumb's distance between the side plate. And that is a great jigging reel. I own one of those. Use it for jigging, use it for fishing some bait as well at times, but primarily as a jigging piece. Real powerful, easier to level out the line given that it's narrower. And they also do an HXW, or wide, which brings that frame out a bit. These guys are very deceptive, and AVET does not waste space with the spool's arbor. They will hold a lot of line. Believe it or not, the standard HX holds line like most manufacturers 30 or 30 narrow, where the HXW holds line capacity like a 30 wide. So they're very, very flexible, and they cast brilliantly like the other AVET reels.